Imagine a room so beautiful it takes your breath away. High ceilings, silk wallpaper, sunlight streaming through tall windows. Now imagine that same room slowly stealing your mind. That's exactly what happened to every woman who slept in the master bedroom of the Hartwell mansion. Over 25 years in 19th-century Pennsylvania, wealthy industrialist Jeremiah Hartwell married 5 women. Each bride entered his grand home healthy, happy, and full of life. Within months, each one suffered the exact same fate: complete mental collapse. What happened in that room was no accident, no curse of bad luck. By the time the truth came out in 1835, it would shock the entire state of Pennsylvania, and the methods used were so cold and calculated, they still chill the blood today. The story began in Millbrook, Pennsylvania, a coal-rich town southwest of Pittsburgh. By 1820, the Industrial Revolution had turned it from farmland into a booming factory town. Smoke from chimneys hung over the Monongahela River, and the richest families built giant mansions on the surrounding hills. In 1821, Jeremiah Hartwell arrived, only 25 years old, ambitious, and hungry for success. He wasn't born into wealth. His father had been a blacksmith in rural Ohio, and Jeremiah had learned early that hard work and sharp thinking could take a man far. Within 5 years, he owned the Hartwell Iron Works, making railroad parts for America's growing westward expansion. By 1828, his fortune was secure, and he built the Hartwell Mansion, a 42-room Georgian masterpiece on Beacon Hill. It wasn't just the size that impressed people. Inside, it was a palace: marble floors, imported carpets, and gardens stretching for acres. But one room stood out above all: the master bedroom suite. It took up the entire east wing of the second floor, with hand-painted French wallpaper, a massive cherry wood 4-poster bed, and tall windows with sweeping views of the valley. Jeremiah himself was just as striking. Over 6 feet tall, with piercing blue eyes and silver hair at a young age, he had the kind of presence that made people listen. He could charm anyone, from wealthy investors to shy young debutantes. So, when he announced his engagement to Margaret Dunlap, the 19-year-old daughter of a respected judge, the whole town celebrated. Their October 1829 wedding was the social event of the decade. At first, married life seemed perfect. But in the spring of 1830, something changed. Margaret, once lively and witty, began drifting into odd silences. Friends noticed her staring out windows as if watching something invisible. Her sister Catherine remembered visiting and finding Margaret standing in the hallway, listening to nothing. "The house talks to me," Margaret whispered once, smiling faintly. Old houses have their own language. By summer, her strange behavior was worse. She refused to sleep anywhere but the master bedroom, insisting that it was her proper place. Servants noticed her spending hours at the tall bedroom windows, not looking outside, but at her own reflection in the glass. She would tilt her head, study herself, and whisper softly as if talking to someone only she could hear. The breaking point came during a dinner party in August. The room was full of Pittsburgh's wealthiest men when Margaret suddenly stood, walked to the dining room mirror, and began talking to her reflection. At first, her words were soft, but soon she was arguing, laughing in a high, strange tone. She asked her reflection, "Why do you look so tired?" and waited for an answer. Jeremiah tried to lead her away, but she snapped, "I'm not finished talking yet." That night, the head housekeeper, Sarah Quinn, found Margaret at 3 in the morning, completely naked, tearing down the French wallpaper in the master bedroom strip by strip. When asked why, Margaret said calmly, "I need to see what's underneath." There was nothing unusual behind the wallpaper, "Just plaster and wood," but Margaret nodded as if she'd discovered something important. Dr. Harrison Henley, the family physician, examined her the next day. Physically, she was fine. Mentally, he wrote, she had an unusual fixation with mirrors and reflections, and believed her reflection was a separate person giving her secret information about the house. 2 weeks later, she was beyond control. She gathered every mirror, polished surface, and reflective object in the mansion into the master bedroom. She arranged them in a strange pattern, then spent the night talking to her other selves. By morning, she didn't recognize anyone, not even her husband. She spoke only to her reflections, calling them her real family. On September 15, 1830, Drive, Henley made the grim decision. Margaret had to be committed to the Pennsylvania Hospital for the Insane. On a gray October morning, she was led to a closed carriage, calling back over her shoulder, "I'll be back soon." She never came back. For 43 years, Margaret remained in the asylum, forever searching for mirrors in her small cell. The town was shocked, but most pitied Jeremiah. In the 1830s, people believed women's minds were fragile, easily disturbed by stress or changes in their social role. Dr. Henley's official report blamed overstimulation of the nervous system from her sudden rise in status and responsibilities. For 3 years, Jeremiah lived quietly, sealing off the master bedroom and moving to a smaller room upstairs. He spent evenings reading medical books and writing letters to doctors about the science of mental affliction. His personal journals later revealed a man obsessed with finding a cause for his wife's breakdown. In 1833, word came that Margaret had died. Her gravestone read simply, "Beloved wife, at peace." But those who knew Jeremiah noticed a change. He became meticulous about his appearance and checked his reflection often. And when he spoke about marriage again, it wasn't with love, it was with a strange, careful calculation. This was only the beginning. 4 more wives would follow, and each would meet the same fate in the master bedroom. If you want, I can now start part 2, where Jeremiah remarries and the horror deepens. That's when the pattern begins to emerge. Do you want me to continue with part 2 in the same chilling, easy-to-read style? Part 2: The Second Bride. Hook. The first Mrs. Hartwell had vanished into madness, taken from the grand mansion on Beacon Hill and locked away forever. The master bedroom had been sealed, its mirrors covered, its walls silent. For 3 long years, Jeremiah Hartwell lived alone, the tragedy of Margaret's breakdown casting a long shadow over Millbrook. But in 1834, the door to that room opened again. A new bride would sleep beneath its high ceilings. And the pattern would begin again. After Margaret's death, Jeremiah spoke of marriage in the same tone he used for business, cold, precise, and deliberate. Friends noticed he had developed what he called compatibility assessments for potential wives, asking questions not about romance, but about habits, health, and, most strangely, mental resilience. It was during this period that he met Elena Rodriguez, the 22-year-old daughter of a Spanish merchant who had recently built trade ties with Pittsburgh's growing industries. Elena was striking. Dark hair, confident smile, and a sharp mind. But what fascinated Jeremiah most was her composure. She didn't flinch under pressure, didn't appear easily shaken. By spring 1834, the engagement was announced, shocking those who thought Hartwell would never remarry. Yet in public, he seemed to have regained his old charm, and Elena looked genuinely happy to step into her role as mistress of the Hartwell mansion. The wedding that June was smaller than his first, but elegant enough to satisfy the town's expectations. And with Elena's arrival came a decision that would later seem ominous. Jeremiah reopened the master bedroom. He had it completely redecorated. Fresh wallpaper, new furniture, and, most importantly, an entirely new set of mirrors. Elena adored the suite. To visitors, she would proudly give tours, showing off the tall windows, the spacious bed, and the way sunlight danced off the mirrors during the day. She especially loved the large vanity mirror where she brushed her hair each morning and night, chatting cheerfully with her personal maid, Maria Santos, who had come with her from Spain. For 6 months, everything seemed perfect. Elena was warm, social, and quickly became a favorite among Millbrook's upper class. She hosted dinners with ease, spoke fluent English and Spanish, and managed the household with efficiency. But as winter crept into Millbrook in late 1834, small cracks began to show. The first signs appeared in February 1835. Maria Santos noticed that Elena was spending far longer at her vanity. This morning, Maria wrote in her private diary, she brushed her hair for almost 2 hours, but she was not looking at herself. She was staring just to the left of her reflection, as if watching someone else in the mirror. When I asked if she needed anything, she said, "She's trying to tell me something important, Maria. I must listen carefully." By March, Maria wrote of a strange new habit, mirror conversations. Elena would move from mirror to mirror throughout the house, speaking softly, pausing to listen, then answering questions no one else could hear. Unlike Margaret, whose behavior had grown frantic and unstable, Elena seemed calm, almost pleased. "She tells me things about the house I never knew," Elena told Maria one afternoon, smiling. "About the family who lived here before. About secrets hidden in the walls. She even gives me advice on running the household. She's very wise." Concerned, Maria quietly sent word to Dr. Harrison Henley, the same physician who had treated Margaret. His notes from this time reveal his unease. The parallels to the previous Mrs. Hartwell's condition are most troubling. Yet, the patient remains perfectly rational and articulate, showing none of the physical exhaustion or incoherence seen before. But Elena's attachment to the mirrors deepened. In April 1835, she made an unsettling announcement to the staff. The woman in the mirrors, whom she now called the Mirror Woman, had told her something important. According to Elena, Margaret Hartwell was still in the house, trapped, watching, and trying to warn future wives about the truth hidden behind the bedroom walls. Elena has become convinced, Henley wrote to a colleague in Philadelphia, that the mirrors contain a spiritual presence. Yet she continues to run her household, socialize normally, and maintain her health. The obsession appears focused entirely on reflective surfaces. Jeremiah's reaction this time was different. When Margaret had fallen ill, he had sought treatment immediately. Now, he did not call for her removal or even attempt to stop her mirror rituals. Instead, he watched. His journals from that spring read more like scientific observation than concern for a wife. Elena's condition progresses along remarkably similar lines to Margaret's, yet the tone of interaction differs, less agitation, more cooperation. This suggests the cause may be environmental rather than hereditary. The master bedroom remains the only shared constant. In early May, Maria Santos wrote the diary entry that investigators would one day call the turning point. This morning, Senora Elena told me the mirror woman showed her a hidden door behind the wallpaper. She says it leads to the truth of the house. She asked me to help her find it. I told her no. She grew angry, not at me, but at the others. She said they were listening, and we must be careful. That night, Elena did not come down for supper. When Maria went to check on her, she found Elena in the master bedroom, sitting cross-legged before the vanity mirror, candles flickering all around her. Her eyes were glassy, her expression serene. "She says tonight we will speak together as one," Elena whispered to Maria without turning away from her reflection. "Then you will understand. The next morning, Elena was back to her duties, cheerful, composed, as if nothing strange had happened. But from that day forward, she refused to allow the mirrors in the bedroom to be cleaned. She claimed that the dust helped her see more clearly. For Jeremiah, it seemed the experiment was far from over. He continued to record Elena's every word about the mirrors, her conversations, her visions. And then, in late June 1835, just 1 year after the wedding, Maria wrote in her diary, "Greater than, the voice in the mirror is no longer friendly. Signora Elena says Margaret is angry now. She says we are running out of time. In part 3, the friendly whispers in the glass turn into something far more dangerous. And this time, the second Mrs. Hartwell may not go quietly. If you want, I can start part 3 with the escalation, Elena's calm turning to fear, the hidden door behind the wallpaper, and Jeremiah's disturbing role becoming clearer. That's where the horror will really tighten its grip. Do you want me to continue with part 3? Part 3. Both women had developed their preoccupation with mirrors within mere months of moving into the master bedroom suite. In each case, the fixation quickly evolved into what Jeremiah described as communication with an intelligence beyond the glass, an unsettling similarity that strengthened his belief in some underlying, repeatable cause. The parallels were too specific to ignore. Both claimed to receive knowledge they could not otherwise have possessed, and both asserted that their reflections conveyed messages about the house's hidden history. By the spring of 1835, Hartwell's interest had shifted from worry to inquiry. Determined to understand the phenomenon, he began what he termed controlled observation of the subject's interactions with reflective surfaces. His notes became increasingly methodical. Which mirrors elicited the most animated conversations, the times of day when episodes intensified, the nature of the information Elena claimed to receive. Patterns emerged. The most vivid and extended dialogues occurred in the master bedroom between sunset and midnight, almost always before the same large vanity mirror that had so consumed Margaret in her final months. The content of these conversations, if Maria Santos's private diary is to be believed, followed recurring themes: the history of the mansion, the lives of previous occupants, and the existence of secrets behind the walls. Elena insisted that the mirror woman was not merely an echo of her own thoughts, but a distinct personality, knowledgeable, deliberate, and intent on passing along warnings. The warnings soon became personal. In May, Elena confided to Maria that Margaret Hartwell had not suffered from madness at all. According to the mirror woman, Margaret had uncovered some terrible truth about the house or its master and had been deliberately discredited, her supposed breakdown manufactured to silence her. "She says Margaret knew too much," Elena whispered, "and that is why she had to be sent away. She is still trying to protect me, so that the truth will be known." As the summer deepened, Elena's fixation could no longer be kept from Millbrook society. Invitations were refused unless the host's home contained at least one suitable mirror. Without it, Elena became tense and distracted, often begging an early departure. By August, her behavior had taken a more ominous turn. On one stifling evening, Jeremiah entered the master bedroom to find his wife seated before the vanity in perfect stillness. Her hands were folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on the glass, her expression one of grief rather than fascination. Without turning her eyes from the mirror, she said quietly, "She has shown me the truth, Jeremiah, about what happens to the women who live in this room. About why Margaret really went mad. According to Hartwell's own journal entry from that night, Elena then made a series of allegations that startled him with their detail. She spoke of hidden passages and secret rooms, of medical experiments performed upon unwilling subjects, and of methods used to induce madness in order to discredit those who had seen too much. The mirrors, she said, were more than glass, they held memories of these events, accessible only to certain women. Her accusations grew sharper. She claimed the medicine Jeremiah provided for her headaches was no medicine at all, but a drug designed to produce hallucinations and confusion. She has shown me what it does, Elena said. It makes women see things they can later be accused of imagining. It makes them appear insane to outsiders, so that no one will believe them. Hartwell, now convinced that Elena's mind was slipping beyond recall, sought Drive Henley's counsel the following morning. The physician, long aware of the parallels with Margaret's case, was alarmed by the rapid development of paranoid delusions. His notes reflect his concern. The patient now speaks of conspiracies involving hidden architecture and secret activities. These ideas are fixed and elaborate, suggesting a complete departure from reality. But Elena had no intention of submitting quietly to an asylum. Within days, she had begun a methodical investigation of the mansion, enlisting Maria and several sympathetic servants. They tapped walls, shifted heavy furniture, and examined unused rooms for concealed features. In late August, their persistence was rewarded. Behind a heavy wardrobe in the master bedroom, Maria found a hollow-sounding wall. Further probing revealed a narrow panel that swung inward to expose a cramped passageway running between the walls. The corridor, scarcely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, connected several upstairs rooms and contained small, deliberate openings, observation ports, Elena called them, that allowed a hidden watcher to peer into bedrooms without detection. Triumphant, Elena declared to Maria, "The passages are real, just as she told me they would be. If this is true, then all of it is true." The revelation unsettled the household staff and profoundly shook Jeremiah. In his journal he admitted, "I was unaware of these passages. The previous owner made no mention of them. Their purpose is beyond my understanding, yet their existence gives weight to certain claims I had dismissed." Still, he maintained that Elena's interpretation of their meaning was utterly divorced from reason. News of the hidden corridors spread swiftly through Millbrook's gossip channels, bringing unwelcome attention to the Hartwell household. Guests began to wonder aloud about the coincidence of two wives afflicted by similar conditions, each tied to the same room and the same mirrors. Questions multiplied. Why had Hartwell not known of the passages? Who built them, and for what purpose? In early September, these whispers reached Pittsburgh, where Elena's father, Don Carlos Rodriguez, had been receiving troubling reports about his daughter. A self-made merchant of formidable will, Don Carlos wasted no time. He arrived at the mansion unannounced, determined to see the truth for himself. His private conversation with Elena revealed a woman who, apart from her convictions about the mirror woman, was lucid, intelligent, and articulate. She spoke calmly, even persuasively, about her discoveries. But when Don Carlos confronted Jeremiah in the library that evening, his tone was severe. "My daughter tells me she has found evidence of criminal acts committed in this house," he said. "She also claims she is being drugged without her knowledge. These are grave accusations, sir. I will not dismiss them simply because you call her mad." The meeting was tense from the outset. Elena insisted on being present, declaring that she could not make important decisions without consulting her advisor. When told the library contained no mirrors, she grew agitated and demanded a hand mirror be brought. "She knows things no one else can know," Elena pleaded. She has been protecting me, just as she tried to protect Margaret. Unlike Drive, Henley or Jeremiah, Don Carlos did not dismiss his daughter's beliefs outright. He studied her closely as she spoke to her reflection, noting the measured cadence of her speech and the consistency of her claims. He listened as she described the secret passages, the whispered warnings, and the alleged purpose of the drugs she believed she was being given. What he concluded that night, no record makes entirely clear, but from that moment onward, the balance of power within the Hartwell mansion began to shift. Got it, all right. Part 4 of your Jeremiah Hartwell story, keeping it in simple, easy English for an American audience, about 1,000 words, and matching the tone and style of the earlier parts you've received. Here's Part 4. Part 4. The Room of Still Water. Dr. Henley's letter ended abruptly, as if he had been interrupted mid-thought. The final line was only half a sentence. The obsession appears to be completely focused on, and then nothing but a long ink smear, as though the pen had slipped from his hand. Jeremiah read it 3 times, each time feeling a strange heaviness in his chest. He tried to convince himself that the missing words were due to nothing more than a spill or an accidental blot, but the silence of the empty house around him made such reassurances feel hollow. The following morning, Jeremiah decided to explore the East Wing. Elena had forbidden him from going there on his first day, claiming it was unsafe due to rotting floorboards. But the East Wing was also where the mirrors were kept, the mirrors she stared into for hours, the mirrors that had stolen her attention from all else. The air in that part of the house was colder, as if the sun had never touched it. Dust hung thick in the still air, floating in narrow beams of light from the cracked shutters. The wooden floor groaned under his weight, but did not give way. Jeremiah passed several closed doors before stopping at one that seemed different. Unlike the others, it had no dust on its handle. Someone had touched it recently. He hesitated, then turned the handle and stepped inside. The room beyond was larger than he expected, its walls covered entirely with mirrors of different sizes and shapes. Some were round and rimmed with gold, others tall and thin with ornate carvings at the top. Every mirror was covered with a white sheet, yet the air shimmered faintly, as though light moved beneath the cloth. One mirror, taller than the rest, stood uncovered in the center of the room. Its frame was dark wood, carved with twisting vines and strange symbols that Jeremiah did not recognize. But the strangest thing was not the mirror's shape. It was what lay within its reflection. He should have seen the room behind him, the covered mirrors, the dust. Instead, the glass showed what looked like still water, deep, dark, and stretching far beyond the frame. It was not a trick of the light. The water moved slowly, ripples spreading across its surface as if stirred by a gentle breeze. Jeremiah stepped closer. The water in the mirror did not reflect him. There was no sign of his face or his body. It was as though he did not exist in that other place. A faint sound reached his ears, the soft lapping of water against a shore. And then, faint but clear, a voice. Jeremiah. He froze. The voice was not Elena's, nor Drive, Henley's. It was deeper, more deliberate, and it seemed to come from far away. Jeremiah. Step forward. He backed away instead, his heart pounding. Something moved beneath the water's surface. It was slow, almost graceful, but too large to be anything he wanted to see clearly. The voice came again, this time sharper. Step forward. Jeremiah stumbled back into the doorframe and fled the room, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed down the empty hallway. That night, Elena spoke little during supper. She seemed distracted, her eyes darting toward the darkened hallway leading to the East Wing. You went in there, didn't you? She said suddenly. Jeremiah nearly dropped his fork. I was only looking for. Don't lie to me. Her voice was low, almost trembling. You saw the water. He nodded slowly. What is it? Elena looked at him for a long moment, then set down her glass. It is not water as we understand it. It is a door to a place where things wait. Things that do not belong in our world. Her hands trembled slightly as she continued. When I first saw it, I thought it was beautiful. Calm, peaceful. I began to spend more and more time there, watching the ripples. And then I began to hear voices. They promised answers to questions I had not even dared to ask. Jeremiah leaned forward. What do they want? Her eyes darkened. They want to be seen. Once you see them, truly see them, they follow you. Even when you look away. Jeremiah felt a cold sweat break out along his back. Dr. Henley's letter. He mentioned your obsession. Was he trying to stop you? Yes, she whispered. And that is why he had to go. Jeremiah's stomach turned. What do you mean? Before he could finish, a sound echoed through the house, a slow, heavy knock. Not at the front door, but from somewhere deep within the east wing. Elena's face went pale. She rose from her chair without a word and began walking toward the sound. Dash dash dash. Jeremiah followed at a distance, his pulse racing. Elena moved like someone in a trance, her bare feet silent on the floorboards. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. It was coming from behind the door to the mirror room. Elena opened the door. The tall mirror in the center now shimmered with light, the water within it glowing faintly. The ripples were stronger now, as though stirred by something just beneath the surface. The voice returned, louder this time, filling the room. Step forward, Elena. She obeyed. Jeremiah grabbed her arm. Don't. Her eyes met his, and for the first time he saw fear there, but not fear of the mirror. Fear of him. They know your name now, she whispered. You've already begun. The water churned violently. A shape rose toward the surface, vast and dark, breaking into fragments of shifting form. It seemed to be made of shadows and light, yet its presence was as solid as stone. The voice spoke again, and now there were two voices, one deep, one high, overlapping in an unnatural harmony. Come through, both of you. The floor beneath Jeremiah's feet seemed to tilt. The air thickened, as though the room itself was sinking into that dark water. Elena stepped closer to the mirror, her fingers reaching toward its surface. The water rippled outward at her touch, but did not spill. Jeremiah pulled her back with all his strength. She stumbled, breaking contact, and the water's glow dimmed slightly. The voices roared in anger, a sound like wind tearing through a forest. Jeremiah didn't wait. He dragged Elena from the room, slamming the door so hard that dust rained from the ceiling. The knocking stopped, but in the silence that followed, Jeremiah could still hear the water, faintly, patiently, lapping against an unseen shore. Dash dash dash. If you'd like, I can continue with part 5 where the water's influence begins spreading beyond the mirror room, affecting the entire Hartwell estate. That's when the real psychological horror starts. Here's part 5 of your Jeremiah Hartwell horror story. I've kept it consistent with the previous parts, focusing on building tension and expanding the eerie, psychological horror. Dash dash dash. Part 5 The Unseen Depths. The days following that night were filled with an unbearable silence. The mansion, once a place of bustling life and parties, felt empty. Every room seemed to carry a heavy, oppressive stillness, as if the house itself were holding its breath, waiting for something. Jeremiah had tried to convince himself that what he had seen in the mirror room was just an illusion, an unsettling trick of the light, a figment of his imagination. But when he closed his eyes, the image of the dark water, rippling with unseen forces, lingered in his mind. Even when he walked through the halls of the mansion, he could feel the pull of the east wing, drawing him back beckoning him to return to that place. Elena had not spoken much since that night. She spent most of her time in the library, her eyes distant, her thoughts seemingly elsewhere. She no longer seemed like the vibrant, confident woman he had married. She had become quiet, withdrawn, and yet there was something about her, something unsettling. It was as though a part of her had left, leaving only the shell of the woman she once was. At night, she would wander through the house, her footsteps soft and silent, her eyes glazed over as though she were searching for something. She would stand in front of mirrors, touching the glass lightly as if expecting something, or someone, to emerge. Sometimes, when Jeremiah would try to speak to her, she would smile faintly but would never meet his eyes. One evening, just after sunset, Jeremiah decided to confront her. He had to know what was happening to her, to them. He had to understand why the house, the mirrors, and the dark water seemed to be consuming her mind, just as it had Margaret's. He found Elena in the hallway, standing in front of the large mirror that hung on the wall just outside the master bedroom. Her reflection stared back at her, but her gaze was distant, unfocused. The mirror seemed to shimmer in the dim light, its surface rippling as if disturbed by some invisible force. "Elena," he called softly. She turned to him slowly, her eyes vacant. There was no recognition in her face, only a deep, unsettling emptiness. "Elena, what are you looking at?" he asked, stepping closer. She didn't respond at first, and for a moment, he thought she hadn't heard him. Then, almost imperceptibly, she whispered, "She's waiting for us." Jeremiah's heart skipped a beat. "Who is?" "The mirror woman," Elena said, her voice flat and distant. "She's waiting. She's always waiting. She wants us to join her." Jeremiah took a step back, his mind racing. He had to get Elena out of this house. He had to find a way to break the hold the mirror had over her before it was too late. But something deep inside him, the same part that had been drawn to the east wing, to the mirrors, kept him rooted in place. "Elena," he said again, his voice more insistent this time. "We need to leave. This house, these mirrors, they're dangerous. You're not well." She blinked, slowly, as though coming out of a fog. Her expression softened for a moment, but only for a moment. The blankness returned almost immediately, and she turned back to the mirror. Jeremiah's frustration boiled over. "Elena, stop. You have to listen to me," he shouted, reaching for her arm. But as his hand touched her, something strange happened. The air around them seemed to grow colder, and the mirrors in the hallway shimmered in unison, as though responding to the tension in the room. The temperature dropped suddenly, the warmth of the summer evening replaced by an icy chill that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. Elena's head jerked toward him, her eyes wide and unblinking. "Don't you see? It's too late," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "She's already inside. She's inside both of us." Before Jeremiah could respond, the entire hallway seemed to shift. The walls began to breathe, in and out, as though the house itself were alive. The mirrors, once merely reflective surfaces, now pulsed with a strange, eerie glow. Jeremiah could feel the pressure building, as if the house were pressing in on him from all sides. "Elena, what's happening?" he gasped, struggling to breathe as the air thickened around them. She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward, her fingers reaching out toward the mirror in front of her. Her reflection twisted and contorted, its features becoming grotesque and warped, as though something beneath the surface were trying to break free. "No," Jeremiah cried, grabbing her arm to pull her away, but it was as if she were rooted to the spot. The mirror's reflection seemed to grow darker, more consuming, drawing Elena closer. With a sudden, sharp movement, Elena wrenched herself from his grasp. "I have to go to her," she whispered, almost pleading. Jeremiah's mind raced. He couldn't let her do this. He couldn't let the mirror take her like it had taken Margaret. He needed to act, but his body felt heavy, as though the very air around him were weighing him down. Please, Elena, he begged. Come back to me. This isn't real. We can leave. We can leave this house and never look back. But Elena only smiled, faint, vacant, and empty. It's too late for that, she said softly, and with a final, eerie look at him, she stepped into the mirror. For a moment, there was nothing but the stillness of the room. Then, with a loud crash, the mirrors around them shattered. The hallway seemed to buckle and twist, as if the house itself were tearing apart at the seams. Jeremiah stumbled backward, his mind reeling. He had to find her. He had to save her. But where was she? Where had she gone? Then, from the depths of the shattered glass, a sound echoed, a voice, low and mocking. Come to her, Jeremiah, it whispered. Come to the water. The voice, deep and chilling, sent a shiver down his spine. He looked down at the shards of broken glass around him, and for the briefest moment, he thought he saw something moving beneath the surface of the glass, something dark and endless, reaching out toward him. But before he could react, the voice spoke again, louder this time. Step forward. Jeremiah's heart pounded in his chest. He knew what he had to do. He had to follow her. He had to go to the water and see it for himself. With shaking hands, he stepped forward, toward the shattered mirror, toward the dark depths that waited for him. If you'd like, we can keep building the suspense and unraveling the mystery of the mansion in part 6, or perhaps explore how Jeremiah tries to save Elena from the mirror's influence. Let me know if you want to continue this eerie path. Got it? Here's part 6, final part, of your story, following your earlier instructions. Part 6, the final reflection. 1,000 words. By the time the rain stopped, Thomas knew something inside him had changed forever. He no longer felt like the same man who had stood on that porch weeks ago, staring at an uncertain horizon. The storms had been more than weather, they had been the world's way of testing his patience, his commitment, and his vision. The work site was still damp, the smell of wet earth rising around the frame of the nearly completed mill. The workers moved slower in the mud, but they moved. That, Thomas thought, was the key, movement, even when conditions weren't perfect. He thought back to the first meeting with Elijah, the mentor who had introduced him to the philosophy that had shaped these past months. Elijah had said, "The man who learns to move forward without applause, without a clear road, and without constant reassurance is the man who will eventually command the applause, build the road, and offer reassurance to others." That statement had burned into Thomas's memory, and now it lived in him as truth. The final test. One morning, before sunrise, Thomas received word that the investors were coming earlier than planned. They wanted to see results. If they were unimpressed, the funding would dry up. The pressure was immense. The mill wasn't fully finished, the machinery wasn't running yet, and the workers were tired from weeks of non-stop labor. In the past, Thomas would have panicked, scrambling to make everything look perfect, losing sleep, and driving everyone harder until mistakes piled up. But this time, he stopped. He closed his eyes and reminded himself of the principles he had lived by these last months. Focus on the process, not the panic. Move deliberately, not frantically. Do the essential work well, leave the rest for later. Instead of rushing to cover every flaw, he chose to focus on one thing: the strong, steady progress they had made. The frame of the building was solid. The stone foundation was unshakable. The structure told a story of resilience. That was worth showing. The investors' visit. When the investors arrived, their boots sank slightly into the wet ground as they walked toward the site. Thomas greeted them calmly. There was no fake charm in his voice, only quiet confidence. "This is where we began," he said, pointing toward the cleared land at the far edge. "And this," he motioned toward the standing frame and sturdy walls, "is where we are now." Every beam, every stone, every nail was placed with care. "We don't just want this mill to run, we want it to last." He didn't hide the unfinished areas. He explained the plan for each section, the timeline, and the reasoning behind each decision. The investors asked sharp questions about cost, speed, and setbacks. Thomas answered them without defensiveness, without rushing. His steadiness had a strange effect on them. Instead of focusing on the mud and missing shingles, they began to see the vision. By the time the tour ended, one of the senior investors pulled him aside and said, "You've built more than a structure here, Thomas. You've built trust. We'll keep the funding going." The quiet victory. That night, Thomas didn't throw a celebration or make grand speeches. He simply walked through the site alone, listening to the quiet hum of the night insects and the drip of water from the eaves. This victory felt different. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't loud. It was earned. He realized something profound. Real success doesn't always feel like fireworks, it often feels like calm. The calm of knowing you stayed true to your vision. The calm of knowing you didn't break yourself for the approval of others. The calm of knowing you've built something that can stand without you constantly holding it up. The principles that stayed. Over the following weeks, Thomas wrote down the lessons he wanted to keep for the rest of his life. 1. Approval is fleeting. Self-respect is lasting. Chasing applause burns energy you could use to build something that deserves applause. 2. Silence is a strength. Not every plan, idea, or frustration needs to be shared. The more you protect your vision, the less it can be shaken. 3. Focus is a superpower. The man who can keep his attention on what matters, even when distractions scream, will always outlast those who scatter their energy. 4. Slow is fast. Steady progress, day after day, beats desperate bursts followed by burnout. 5. The foundation matters more than the facade. Build the parts no one sees with the same care as the parts that will be on display. The new beginning. Months later, the mill opened. The machinery turned for the first time, the water wheel creaked into motion, and the workers, his workers, cheered. Customers came from nearby towns, curious and impressed. The success was real, but Thomas knew it was only the beginning. One evening, Elijah visited the mill. He stood quietly, watching the wheel turn in the golden light of sunset. "It's a fine thing you've done here," he said at last. Thomas smiled. "It's not just the mill, Elijah. It's me. I'm not the same man who started this." Elijah nodded. "That's the only kind of victory worth having, the kind that builds you as much as it builds the work." Final reflection. Looking back, Thomas realized that every challenge, the storms, the delays, the skepticism, had been necessary. Without them, he might have rushed, cut corners, or built something flashy but weak. Now, he carried something that couldn't be taken away, an inner steadiness. It was the kind of power no market shift, no critic, and no setback could destroy. He had mastered the invisible standards, the discipline no one applauds, the patience no one sees, the focus no one claps for, but that silently shapes everything worth keeping. And with that, he stepped forward into the next chapter of his life, knowing the real foundation for all his future work wasn't stone or timber. It was him. Got it? I'll continue with part 7 of the Jeremiah Hartwell story in the same style, 1,000 words, keeping the tone and structure exactly as in earlier parts. Part 7 The Mirror in the West Wing. By late October, the sky above Hartwell House had begun to take on a permanent iron-gray color. The days shortened quickly, and a damp chill seeped into the walls, clinging to the air in a way that no fire could fully chase away. Elena had taken to lighting candles in the library long before sunset, their small flames flickering against the darkening glass of the tall west windows. Dr. Henley had been away for several days, having been summoned to Philadelphia for a medical consultation, leaving me, Samuel Avery, alone in my duties as steward. In his absence, the mood in the house shifted noticeably. Without his quiet but firm presence, Elena seemed to wander more freely, drifting through corridors she had avoided for weeks. One evening, I found her standing at the entrance of the unused west wing, her hand resting on the frame of the locked double doors. These doors had been closed since before my arrival, their key kept in the butler's safe. When I asked her why she was there, she did not answer at once. Instead, she tilted her head toward the wood, as though listening to something beyond. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. "Hear what, ma'am?" I asked, straining my ears. There was nothing. No footsteps, no voices, only the low moan of wind pressing against the outer walls. "A tapping," she said softly. From the mirror. The West Wing, I had been told, contained several guest rooms and an abandoned ballroom, its mirrors left to tarnish under decades of dust. It had been closed to conserve heat, though rumors among the staff suggested other reasons, whispers of strange accidents, sudden illnesses, and a ball held in 1843 that had ended abruptly under mysterious circumstances. That night, as I made my rounds, I could not help but pass near the West Wing doors again. This time, I lingered. I pressed my ear to the seam between the wood panels, feeling foolish, yet oddly compelled. At first, I heard nothing. But then, faintly, so faintly I wondered if it were my imagination, there came 3 slow taps, as if made by fingernails on glass. The next morning, Elena appeared at breakfast looking more composed than she had in weeks. Her hair was neatly arranged, her posture upright. She announced, almost cheerfully, that she intended to have the West Wing opened that evening. "For what purpose?" I asked, careful to keep my voice neutral. "To look," she replied simply. "I am done with pretending the mirrors are not speaking to me." I protested, reminding her that Dr. Henley had advised against such ventures, especially in his absence. She only smiled faintly and said, "Dr. Henley believes my mind is ill. He will not believe otherwise until he sees what I see. And for that, the West Wing must be opened." By dusk, the house was silent save for the sound of rain tapping against the windows. Elena appeared at the West Wing doors with a brass candle holder in one hand and the key, taken, I assumed, from the butler's safe, in the other. The lock turned with a reluctant click, and the doors creaked open onto a corridor shrouded in darkness and stale air. The smell was the first thing I noticed, a mix of damp plaster, dust, and something faintly metallic. We stepped inside. The corridor stretched ahead, lined with closed doors on either side. The candlelight flickered over faded wallpaper patterned with roses, their colors dulled to a shadow of pink. The boards groaned under our weight, and once or twice, I thought I heard a soft scurrying in the walls. At the far end was the ballroom. Its double doors opened with less resistance than I expected, revealing a vast, cold space. The ceiling was high, the plaster moldings elaborate but chipped. The parquet floor was warped in places, and cobwebs draped from the corners like gray veils. And there, covering the length of one wall, stood the mirror. It was enormous, nearly floor to ceiling, framed in gilded wood that had darkened with age. The glass was cloudy in places, but clear enough to reflect our candlelight. My own reflection looked thin and pale in its surface, and Alina's seemed unnaturally sharp, her features defined in a way that made her appear older. She approached it slowly, her free hand outstretched. "They move when you are not looking directly at them," she murmured. I asked what she meant, but she only stood before the glass, studying it as if waiting for something to emerge. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the windows of the ballroom. The candle flame wavered in the draft, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement, not in the room itself, but in the reflection. A shadow crossed the mirrored floor, though no one stood there. I swallowed hard. "Did you see?" "Yes," she said. "They are always here, watching, waiting." Her hand touched the glass. I saw her fingertips press against her own reflected hand, yet for a moment, they did not align. Her reflection's hand seemed to lag, as though moving a fraction of a second behind her real one. "Elena," I said sharply. "Step back." But she did not. Her eyes were fixed on the reflection, wide and unblinking. The glass began to ripple, subtly at first, like heat haze over a summer road. Then more clearly, as though the surface were liquid disturbed by an unseen breeze. Shapes began to form in the depths. Pale faces, indistinct yet unmistakably human, their eyes hollow and unlit. The tapping came again, louder now, urgent, from the other side of the mirror. 3 sharp raps. "Elena." I moved to pull her back, but as my hand touched her shoulder, the candle went out, plunging the ballroom into darkness. I could still see the mirror, not by light, but by some unnatural glow from within. The faces pressed closer, their mouths moving soundlessly. My own reflection was gone. Only Elena stood in that ghostly surface, though she was not moving as I saw her in the room. Her mirrored self smiled, slowly, in a way the real Elena did not. And then, just for an instant, her reflection reached toward me. The candle flared back to life in my trembling hand. The faces were gone. The glass was still. Elena stood before it, pale but calm, her hand still resting on the cold surface. "They want me to stay," she whispered. "And one day, I will." We left the West Wing without speaking further. I locked the doors behind us, but as we walked away, I could still hear the faint tapping from within. That night, I dreamed of the mirror, and when I woke, I could not remember which side of the glass I belonged to. If you want, I can move straight to part 8 so the tension builds without break. Do you want me to continue? Got it, I'll continue Jeremiah Hartwell with part 8 in the same style as before, keeping the historical horror tone, simple American English narrative, and around 1,000 words. Part 8 The Glass That Watches Back. The wind outside Hartwell House howled like a chorus of mourners, slamming cold rain against the tall windows. Jeremiah sat at the long dining table, staring at the largest of Elena's mirrors, a gilt-edged monstrosity that stretched nearly from floor to ceiling. He had never liked it, but Elena insisted it remain where it was. She was not in the room. This was the first time in weeks he had been alone with it. He couldn't remember when he had first noticed the difference, but now it was impossible to ignore. The glass no longer reflected him exactly. His posture was always a little off, his expression slower to change. Sometimes, when he leaned forward, the reflection didn't follow right away. And now, as the thunder rolled and the house creaked, the figure in the mirror smiled. Jeremiah's own mouth did not move. He jerked back in his chair, his heart thudding hard enough to hurt. He blinked rapidly, thinking the lightning had played tricks on his eyes. But the image in the mirror only leaned closer, its eyes gleaming with some dark intelligence. From somewhere upstairs, a floorboard groaned. "Elena," he called, his voice too loud in the empty dining room. No answer. The reflection tilted its head, as though listening to something Jeremiah could not hear. For the first time, Jeremiah noticed the faintest shape behind it, a shadow standing in the mirrored room. It was human in outline, but wrong in its stillness, as though carved from smoke. Jeremiah rose from the table, moving toward the mirror without meaning to. His shoes made almost no sound on the thick carpet. When he was close enough to see the fine scratches in the glass, the figure's expression changed, pity. He didn't know why, but it felt like the worst thing in the world. A cold, dry whisper brushed his ear. "She knows." Jeremiah spun around. The room was empty. The reflection was back to normal. That night, Elena returned from the attic with another mirror, smaller, framed in silver. She carried it as if it were an infant. Jeremiah followed her into the library. "You have too many of these," he said, his voice sharper than intended. "I've told you before. Don't raise your voice," she said without looking at him. "It listens." He froze. "What listens?" "This one," she replied softly, setting the mirror on a low table near the fire. "And the others. But this one is different. It doesn't just watch. It remembers." "Elena, this is. Do you think I'm mad?" she asked, turning toward him with sudden intensity. Jeremiah hesitated. "I think you are frightened." "Then you should be, too." Before he could answer, the silver-framed glass darkened, as though a shadow had passed over it. But there was no one between it and the firelight. The surface swirled faintly, like disturbed water. "Elena," his voice cracked. "What have you done?" She knelt in front of the mirror, her reflection staring back at her with unnerving focus. "It's not what I've done, Jeremiah. It's what they've done, and what they want me to finish." The days after that conversation felt wrong in ways Jeremiah couldn't name. The mirrors seemed to multiply. Some appeared in rooms where he swore there had been none the day before. Others changed places, as if someone had moved them in the night. One morning, he came down to breakfast and found the dining table set for two, though Elena had been gone since dawn. The plates reflected perfectly in the mirror across from him, except that his reflection's plate was empty. And once, while passing the upstairs hallway, he caught sight of something impossible. In the mirror there, Elena walked just behind him, her hand reaching toward his shoulder. When he turned, the hallway was empty. Jeremiah began sleeping less. At night, he would sit in his study with the oil lamp burning low, writing down everything he thought he saw. It was an effort to keep reality separate from whatever the mirrors were showing him. On the third night of this vigil, he heard footsteps in the hall outside his study. They stopped at his door. "Elena," he called. Silence. Then, the faintest knock. He rose and opened the door. The hall was empty. When he turned back, the mirror above the fireplace showed him standing in the doorway, but the door behind him in the reflection was open wider. A pale figure stood just inside, its head bowed. Jeremiah turned so fast he nearly lost his balance. The study was empty. The door was closed, but the reflection still showed the figure inside with him. By the end of the week, Jeremiah had decided to destroy one. He chose the smallest, a hand mirror with a tarnished brass frame, left on the side table by the library window. He carried it out into the rain, down the slick stone path to the tool shed. He placed it face down on the chopping block, picked up the hammer, and brought it down hard. The mirror did not break. Not even a crack. Instead, the glass rippled under the blow, and for a moment, Jeremiah saw the outline of his own face, but aged, gaunt, and hollow-eyed. Then it faded. From the trees beyond the garden came a sound like soft, wet laughter. That night, Elena finally told him. There is a place on the other side, she said, her voice a whisper meant only for him. A place where all reflections live. They watch us as we watch them. Some of them want to come through. And you've been helping them. I've been keeping the wrong ones out, she said. But something has changed. They're restless. Jeremiah stared at her, trying to decide if he believed her or if this was some elaborate madness. But deep down, he knew. He had seen enough to know. What happens if they come through? He asked. Alina's expression darkened. They won't need us anymore. On the 8th night of the storm, Jeremiah woke to find Elena standing at the foot of their bed, holding the silver-framed mirror. It's time, she said. For what? She did not answer. Instead, she set the mirror against the wall and stepped back. The surface of the glass began to ripple. And then, something stepped out. If you want, I can continue with part 9 and bring the tension to the edge before the climax. Would you like me to do that next? Got it, I'll continue La Temible with part 9, keeping it in easy, simple English, about 1,000 words, set in 1892 Mexico City, and aimed at an American YouTube audience. La Temible, part 9, The Trap. By the spring of 1892, Guadalupe Martínez de Bejarano felt more untouchable than ever. For years she had poisoned, robbed, and manipulated without being caught. The police had no proof. Her neighbors feared her. Even her closest friends obeyed her out of dread. But her enemies were growing. Inspector Ramon Ortega, a patient man in his 40s with sharp eyes and a calm voice, had been quietly studying Guadalupe for months. He was not like the other officers who dismissed rumors as superstition. He believed the whispers about the sudden deaths, the faint smell of bitter almonds in victims' rooms, and the pattern of Guadalupe always visiting before the tragedies. Ortega knew he could not arrest her without evidence. But he also knew one thing. Killers like Guadalupe always made mistakes when they believed no one could stop them. One afternoon in late March, Guadalupe sat at her table, grinding almonds into a fine paste. On the table beside her was a small bottle of clear liquid, arsenic. She hummed a soft tune, almost cheerful. Her maid, Maria, entered with a nervous look. Senora, there is a man outside asking for help. He says his wife is very sick. Guadalupe's smile widened. Invite him in. The man stepped in. He looked poor, wearing a faded coat and carrying his hat in his hands. His voice trembled. My wife, she cannot keep food down. I heard you have special remedies. Guadalupe leaned forward, her tone warm and false. I can prepare something for her. But it will not be free. The man nodded quickly. I will pay what I can. She agreed to visit the man's home that evening. What she did not know was that the man was one of Ortega's informants, and the wife was an undercover female officer pretending to be ill. That night, Guadalupe arrived carrying a small leather bag. Inside were dried herbs, almond paste, and the arsenic. She moved through the poor home with practiced confidence, as if she had been treating patients all her life. The wife lay on the bed, pale and shivering, pretending to be weak. Guadalupe mixed a tea, her hands moving calmly. Then, from her bag, she took out the arsenic bottle and poured a few drops into the cup. Before she could bring it to the woman's lips, the door burst open. Inspector Ortega stepped inside with two officers. Senora Guadalupe Martínez de Bejarano, he said firmly, you are under arrest for attempted murder. For the first time in years, Guadalupe froze. Her face went pale, but it lasted only a moment, then she laughed. You have no proof. These are just herbs. Ortega stepped forward, holding up the arsenic bottle with gloved hands. We will let the laboratory decide that. At the police station, Guadalupe refused to speak. She sat silently, her dark eyes following every movement. The officers thought she looked more like a queen than a prisoner. Ortega worked day and night to gather witnesses. Some were too afraid to testify. Others saw a chance to finally speak. One old woman claimed Guadalupe had poisoned her son for money. Another said Guadalupe had given her a tonic that nearly killed her. The evidence began to build, but it was still dangerous. Wealthy families who had once benefited from Guadalupe's schemes tried to pressure the police to release her. She had powerful friends, and powerful secrets about them. Meanwhile, word of her arrest spread through Mexico City. The newspapers called her La Temible, the fearsome one. People crowded outside the jail, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman who had brought so much quiet death to the city. Inside her cell, Guadalupe remained calm. She braided her hair every morning, kept her clothes neat, and never begged for mercy. To the guards, she seemed almost certain she would be free again soon. One evening, a young guard named Luis dared to ask her, "Señora, do you feel guilty for the people you've killed?" She smiled slowly. "Do you feel guilty for the rats you kill in your kitchen?" "I only removed the weak from the streets. The city is cleaner because of me." Luis left her cell trembling. Inspector Ortega knew the trial would be difficult. Without catching her in the act, the court might release her. But the arsenic in the tea was undeniable. The laboratory confirmed it in writing. Still, Guadalupe had one more card to play. Through bribery and threats, she convinced one of the key witnesses to disappear. Another was found dead under mysterious circumstances before the trial. It became clear to Ortega, if he did not move fast, Guadalupe might walk free and take revenge on everyone who had crossed her. On April 12, 1892, the trial began. The courtroom was packed with journalists, curious citizens, and family members of her alleged victims. The air was thick with whispers. The prosecutor described her as a woman who hides poison behind a smile, detailing each suspicious death connected to her. The defense called her a healer, misunderstood by the ignorant. When it was her turn to speak, Guadalupe rose and looked at the jury. "I have never harmed anyone. I have only helped the poor when no doctor would. This is a city that fears strong women. That is my only crime." Her voice was steady. Some jurors shifted uncomfortably. But the prosecutor had saved his most powerful evidence for last. He called the undercover officer, the sick wife, from the sting operation, to the stand. She described every moment of Guadalupe preparing the poisoned tea, and the jury listened in complete silence. Then Inspector Ortega himself held up the arsenic bottle. "This," he said, "was in her bag. Tested, confirmed, and deadly. Ask yourselves, why would a healer carry such a thing?" The defense had no answer. By the end of the day, the jury began deliberations. Guadalupe sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. She looked neither afraid nor angry, only watchful. Outside the courthouse, the crowd waited for news. Some wanted justice, others wanted her released. As night fell, a verdict was reached. The foreman stood and spoke clearly, "Guilty of attempted murder." Gasps filled the room. For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed Guadalupe's face, a shadow of something between rage and disbelief. She was sentenced to prison. But as Ortega escorted her away, she leaned close and whispered, "This is not the end. You will see my face again." Those words stayed with him for years. And indeed, strange rumors would later rise, that she had bribed guards, that she had been seen walking free in another part of Mexico. But for that moment in 1892, La Temible was finally behind bars. Or so they thought. If you want, I can continue with part 10, the finale, where we close her story with a chilling ending and leave the audience wondering whether she truly escaped. Would you like me to move straight into that? Got it. Here's part 10 of Guadalupe Martínez de Bejarano, Temible, written in simple English for an American YouTube audience, 1,000 words, with the final call to action. Part 10, the final reckoning. The year was 1892, and Mexico City was no longer the same place it had been when Guadalupe Martínez de Bejarano first began her work as a midwife and healer. The streets were busier, the markets louder, and the whispers about Temible had grown darker, almost like a ghost story that parents told their children to keep them in line. But Guadalupe was not a ghost. She was very much alive, and the police were closer to her than ever before. The growing net around her. For years, she had avoided suspicion by being clever. She worked only with clients who trusted her, and she kept her conversations short, never writing anything down. But after several women died under mysterious circumstances in her care, the whispers became harder to ignore. Some claimed she was simply unlucky, that she had been with patients who would have died anyway. Others said she had a gift, the ability to take life quietly, without leaving a trace. By mid-1892, 2 detectives from Mexico City's newly organized investigative division had been assigned to follow her. They didn't have proof yet, but they had patterns: women who had been seen with Guadalupe, women who died soon after, and families who received nothing but grief. The client who spoke. The case might have stayed unsolved forever if not for one woman, Isabella Torres. Isabella was from a poor family. She had come to Guadalupe in secret, asking for help with a pregnancy she could not afford to keep. But as soon as Guadalupe gave her the remedy, Isabella began to feel sharp, unnatural pains in her chest and throat. Something was wrong. Panicking, she staggered out of the small back room before the poison could fully take hold. She collapsed in the street, but by luck, a passing carriage driver recognized her and brought her to a doctor. Isabella survived, and when she was able to speak, she told the police exactly what had happened inside Guadalupe's home. It was the testimony the detectives had been waiting for. The arrest. One humid summer evening in August 1892, police surrounded the small adobe house where Guadalupe lived. Inside, she was mixing herbs in a clay bowl, her sleeves rolled up, her movements calm as ever. When the officers entered, she did not run. She did not scream. Instead, she looked up at them and said in her measured voice, "Greater than. So, you have finally decided." On her table, they found bottles of bitter powders, dried plants, and a small vial of clear liquid later identified as a lethal herbal extract. In the back room, they discovered 2 young women waiting for her, both pale and frightened. The trial. The trial of Guadalupe Martínez de Bejarano became one of the most talked about events of the decade. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, some shouting for justice, others defending her as a misunderstood woman who had helped countless mothers through difficult births. The prosecution painted her as a predator, a woman who preyed on desperation and poverty, offering solutions that ended in death. They connected her to the suspicious deaths of at least 10 women over a period of 5 years. Witnesses included grieving family members, neighbors, and, most importantly, Isabella Torres. Guadalupe never broke down in court. She sat quietly, hands folded, answering questions with short, steady replies. When asked if she poisoned her patients, she only said, "Greater than, I gave them what they asked for. Life or death is in God's hands." The verdict. After weeks of testimony, the jury found her guilty of multiple counts of murder. The judge, in a heavy voice, sentenced her to death by firing squad. The city buzzed with the news. For some, it was the long-awaited end of a dangerous figure. For others, it was the silencing of a woman who had provided the only help they could find in desperate times. The final morning. On the morning of her execution, Guadalupe dressed in a clean black dress and covered her hair with a dark shawl. She refused food but asked for a small cup of coffee. When the guards came for her, she walked without resistance to the courtyard where the firing squad waited. The air was cool, the sky overcast. She stood tall, her eyes scanning the small crowd that had gathered, journalists, officials, and a few curious citizens. Some swore she even smiled. Before the blindfold was tied, she spoke her last words. "Greater than, you can kill my body, but my name will live longer than all of you." A volley of rifles cracked through the air. Guadalupe Martínez de Bejarano, La Temible, fell to the ground, her story sealed in blood and legend. Aftermath. In the weeks after her execution, newspapers debated her legacy. Some called her Mexico's first female serial killer. Others argued she was a victim of circumstance, punished for operating in a male-dominated medical world where poor women had no legal options. Her case became a strange mix of cautionary tale and urban legend. To this day, some say her spirit roams the old streets of Mexico City, offering help to desperate women, for a price. The legend lives on. Whether she was a cold-blooded murderer or a tragic figure caught between morality and survival, one thing is certain: Guadalupe Martínez de Bejarano left a mark on history that will never fade. Her name still drifts through Mexico's darker folklore, a reminder that desperation can create both heroes and monsters. Loudspeaker call to action for YouTube video. If you found this story chilling, don't let it disappear into history. Subscribe, like, and share so more people can discover the truth about La Temible. And tell us in the comments, was she a monster, or a misunderstood woman in a cruel world?